listening to Beck Simmons on ABC Gippsland.
A new blood test to predict inherited Alzheimer's disease up to 16 years before symptoms show could be on the cards. Now, this research has been going on worldwide since 2008, and Professor Peter Schofield is the CEO of Neuroscience Research Australia, and he's here to tell us about it. Good morning.
Good morning, Beck.
Now, what percentage of people with Alzheimer's inherit the disease?
The inherited form is really very rare, Beck. Just dozens of families around the world, which is why this has been an international study. But why they're so important and valuable in our research efforts is that with these families, we know exactly when the dementia will onset. And so then we can measure, as in this case, the markers and see if they accurately predict when the dementia will happen. Now, for just dozens of families around the world, you sort of go, well, why? Well, these families mirror what happens to most of us in the community who get late onset, old age Alzheimer's disease. So our hope is that this work would translate then across to being useful in predicting Alzheimer's disease long before onset in you and me in our older age.
Now, you say Alzheimer's and then before dementia onset. Are those two terms interchangeable?
No. Dementia is what you and I see. That's somebody who's losing their cognitive ability, their memory. In Alzheimer's, they lose spatial skills. They can't remember where they are and don't have difficulties with daily living activities. The most common cause of dementia, the thing that we see, is Alzheimer's disease, but there are many other diseases that cause dementia, each of them with slightly different features. But the sort of the reason why they're often used interchangeably is because the most common cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease.
So can you explain for us a little bit more about how this new evidence will help the broader community, I guess, predict when they might have Alzheimer's in the future? Sure.
We're certainly not at the point of having a test which could be used in the community. This is sort of breaking research. The reason why we want to know if we're at risk for Alzheimer's is because then there are a bunch of things that we can do. Unfortunately today there are no drugs that will cure or stop its progression, but we do know that there are a lot of activities that we can undertake, being cognitively and socially engaged, being physically fit, keeping our blood circulation, because our brain uses most of the blood supply. So keeping all of those things in good shape are things that we can do. So it's perhaps a bit like a cholesterol test. You have a cholesterol test and your levels are high and they change and go higher, so you need to then take some lifestyle activities to manage that, to avoid risk of heart attacks. And hopefully you're early in cholesterol, then you can have a medication. We're doing other research, as are many people around the world, trying to develop such a medication. So you need to then have a test that would allow you to be able to work out who should get that medication when we have it.
Okay, and I guess it's trying to find out what medication would target which parts of the brain. Is that where the gap is?
That's part of it, and every time we find a new marker, in this case, this particular marker is a measure of nerve cells that are dying in the brain. It's seen in the blood. That's very useful because most of the testing that's been done experimentally in Alzheimer's disease has been done on spinal fluid, so that's a lot more invasive. We'd all prefer a simple blood test, and this particular test has worked well in blood. So we hope that would be another feature that helps the world develop good, accurate predictive tests for onset of Alzheimer's in particularly the sporadic older populations, and also able to develop medications that may be able to slow its progress or halt it even.
At what age do people start to show symptoms of regular Alzheimer's rather than the inherited?
Yeah. So the inherited forms happen before age 65. typically in the 40s and 50s. So they're very rare and really uncommon. It's less than 1% of the population has dementia of any form at age 65, but by the age of 85 or 90, about a third or a quarter of us will have dementia, and most of us, that will be Alzheimer's disease. So there's this progressive increase from mid-60s on until our older age. And with Australians, on average, living into their 80s, then there are more and more of us who actually have Alzheimer's.
But more and more people who end up in nursing homes.
Exactly. This is one of our challenges of so much of our relatively good lifestyle, our good health care, means that we do live older, and as we live to an older age, the biggest single risk factor for all the dementias, and Alzheimer's in particular, is age. So the longer we live, sadly, the more we are at risk of Alzheimer's.
Okay, well, Professor Peter Schofield, thanks so much for telling us about the research this morning.
It's a pleasure.
Professor Peter Schofield is from the Neuroscience Research Australia. He is the CEO of that. It sounds like some pretty exciting evidence they found, and hopefully it will help to detect in future, and he said it's very far away, but in future it might be able to detect early signs of Alzheimer's before symptoms show.